Well, like when we first started, you pretty much just go straight to the form. So if the form has a flaw or you don't have a good fit, it shows through. Where now as time goes by, your clay work is what you're really relying on to get the look around the eyes. It's not just poked in there and pull the hide over it. You get to do a relaxed eye or a directional stares. You can do all that with your clay work. And then what glass you pick, that helps with the look of the deer also, or for any animal for that matter.
We got to crack open the big trucks here. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, thank you. So John just brought down my deer mount from my Texas whitetail hunt last year. Went out to Texas with the Nosler folks, John and Maddie. Brandon was out there. A couple other, Bert Soren was out there, and Andrew from Yeti. But anyway, shot this deer and gave it to John here to do a mount. But I've always really liked the pedestal mounts. I worked for a taxidermist a little bit, just fleshing bears, basically doing the dirty work for Jay Roberson up in Lincoln when I was in high school. And I always thought his pedestal mounts were cool, and I've always wanted one. I've never had one. So said I wanted a pedestal mount looking left because I had a couple different spots he could go in, and but I didn't really give John any more direction. And, man, you absolutely crushed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's got this beautiful wood base. Is it cedar?
Juniper.
Yeah. Juniper tree trunk coming up, holding up the deer, and then this rock that you made that is not a rock, it's foam, but it absolutely looks like a rock. The artistic ability of a really good taxidermist is crazy. It's just amazing how you, like, just to make the rock look like a rock. How do you do that?
Well, there was a lot of shitty rocks early on. Trying to get, I think a lot of it came down to trying to figure out a good paint schedule and how you layer your paints up and how you get them to fade together. Because if you paint it with a brush, it just doesn't. It never turns out. No matter how hard you try, it just never quite turns out.
So you're spraying it?
Yep. Actually, a very, very, very good artist, Dale Manning, is the one that helped me get that figured out to do those.
Oh, really?
Yep.
The rock itself, just looks heavy. It looks like a rock, But there's little details that good taxidermists do. It's one thing to make a rock, and I've seen a lot of pedestals. I've seen a lot of different stuff where there's a rock. Like a lot of them have a mountain goat standing on them or something like that, hanging on a wall. It's one thing to make a rock. It's another thing to add the little detail, like that rock that you made. It looks like there's sand. It looks like there's little teeny tiny pebbles. It looks like there's medium-sized rock, and then there's a couple bigger chunky pieces laying there. And that's what you see, unless it's a wind blown and washed spot, generally there's always the little flat ledges have little small rocks laying on them as that erosion happens.
Yep, the fines all settle down and balance out on there.
Yeah, so the way that you put together that stuff is what gives it life, that
it
rock
makes
life.
It look realistic, like something that you would see outside.
Yeah. And the cactus, the only thing missing from that cactus is my foot, with the amount of cactuses I kicked in Texas walking around.
Stuck to your foot.
Yeah, because when you hunt here in Montana, you just kind of tromp around, and you don't think about snakes, and you don't think about cactus.
Right.
Especially where you live and where I live.
Yeah, no cactus.
No cactus and no snakes. And then all of a sudden, you go to Texas, and they're like, hey, man, watch where you're stepping.
Walking,
yeah, and I think the first day I wore my tennis shoes down there because it was, it was warm. It was 70s or maybe even close to 80. And it wasn't hard hiking. It wasn't mountains or whatever. And we were in and out of the truck and stuff. So I was like, well, I'm just going to wear my tennis shoes. Just move nice and fast because I do that a lot in bow season here. I'll wear a light pair of hiking shoes and not have a heavy boot. Well, after day one, I was like, okay, I got out of the truck and would start to walk, and I would kick a cactus with the top of my foot.
Stick right to you.
Oh, man. Yeah. And then the whole, sitting down to glass or kneeling down, putting your hands
putting
in
up spot and stock on. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But in that mount, you've actually got a cactus. Now, where did that cactus come from?
It's a casting.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's completely synthetic.
Really?
Yep.
So I was joking earlier that I'm not going to have to water it.
Nope.
So that's good. So I don't kill it. Aside from the pedestal, then you get to the deer, and this is the thing that And I'd be curious to hear your process because Jay Roberson that lives up in Lincoln, I've known him forever, and did a lot of work for him, and he's really, really good taxidermist. And he talks so much about it's those final touches about how it actually starts in the beginning about like making the form fit the actual animal versus like cutting, like there's taxidermists that'll like cut the hide down to fit a form that they buy off the internet. Is that right?
Yeah, it's been a practice. Yeah,
so you actually add like blocking, or you add like clay or different things to the form?
So like on your general rough-in, if you have to jump up your neck sizes and stuff, usually we split and quarter the neck and then enlarge it all at one time with foam. Then you can carve it back. Same foam that the form is made out of. So then you can just rasp it back down. Then a lot of your fine detail stuff, like the wrinkles in the neck, those are all done in clay. That way you can form it as it dries, so it doesn't look like you just chopped 4 dents in there and poked the skin into it. You have that soft roll.
Yeah.
So there's clay, there's epoxy, and there's foam.
So how many times on an animal, because I remember Jay doing this a lot, it seemed like there was a lot of taking the hide on and off.
Test fitting is what we call it.
Yeah?
Yeah, so you put it on there and see how close you are, then start your alterations, and then put it back on. And if you have to continue, you can either at that time go bigger or refine it down smaller, and then you start doing like your turn and stuff, and you want to make sure you're not getting a pinch point where it's binding up in the neck like in the corner of the turn, so that you can adjust clay or take it down and put clay in so the hide will sink into the clay instead of being trapped on the form.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's there was all that, and then I remember how much he talked about really what makes a mountain is the face, is the eyes and the eyes and the nose.
And like, you don't even really have to know anything about taxidermy. If you see one that's poorly executed and one that's really good, you can just tell it looks real. So yeah, you're always just trying to get it to where anybody would notice that it looks like it's alive.
And it's weird because I could never actually do it myself. Even if you stood there and told me how to use the paint and how to do the different stuff, I could never actually do it myself. But you're right. Like I can see when I see a mount, I'm like, something's wrong. But a lot of times I can't even pick it out. I just know something's wrong with that son of a bitch. It's not looking right.
Well, like when we first started, you pretty much just go straight to the form. So if the form has a flaw or you don't have a good fit, it shows through. Where now as time goes by, your clay work is what you're really relying on to get the look around the eyes. It's not just poked in there and pull the hide over it. You know, you get to do a relaxed eye or a directional stares. You can do all that with your clay work. And then what glass you pick, that helps with the look of the deer also, or for any animal for that matter.
Do you have photos of animals you look at while you're doing it?
Yeah. Honestly, one of the greatest things is Google Images now. Just have an iPad sit there and I can scroll through and be like, oh, that's the look I'm going for right there.
I'm so old. I was because I asked that because I remember Jay would have he had a photo book. Mm-hmm. He'd pull out whitetail photo or mule deer, whatever, and it was super close ups. But he actually would went to like a game farm and took photos of actual animals. Yeah, but he would refer to them every single time. Yeah, but I guess I forgot about the internet.
Yeah, that's like I still have my library of all my reference photos, but yeah, for a life size, it's really, really good because then you can look through hundreds of pictures and see a pose. Like if you're trying to do something dynamic, you can pick a pose right off there and just have it pulled up while you're doing all your alterations.
How does it work when you get an animal in? You've probably mounted almost everything at this point, but like there's got to be a lot of times in your career where in comes a muskox or a reindeer or something that you've never mounted before because of where you live.
Always, it'll be the best one you've ever done the first time, so you can always have that going for you at least.
True. I'm the worst.
Reference, and basically like phone a friend. I have a good network of guys that have been really generous with how-tos and what not to do's and stuff. So if I have what form should I start with, they'll usually hook me up on stuff like that, especially when I was first starting.
Are taxidermists pretty sharing?
It kind of depends. It's like kind of an individual based thing there. Some of them are like, don't look, but
right.
Yeah. So most of the guys that are really good, they've all been very helpful.
Right. They're at a point in their careers where, like yourself, I can't imagine you could be real threatened by a 25-year-old kid getting going.
No, I think it's exciting. I'm like, I remember that.
Yeah.
Good luck,
Yeah. Good luck, sucker.
You should become an electrician.
Yeah. No shit. Yeah. Yeah. You want to ever not hunt yourself? Be a taxidermist. It's like being a game warden.
Right. That's one of the first questions I ask people if they're going to come interview. I'm like, do you like hunting? And they're like, oh yeah, I love it. And I'm like,
You're out.
yeah, it's probably not going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah. So what, with that, how are people, are they just showing up randomly all hours of the day, knocking on your door at midnight? Like, do you live right where your taxidermy shop is?
Yeah, I live about probably 300 yards away from it.
Okay. So people come bang on your door and like, hey, I got a bear. It's 1 a.m. Cause I mean, let's face it, a lot of people are shooting something right at dark.
And then they're leaving town the next day.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of guys that come up from like Utah for a spring bear. So yeah, I've done a lot of bear skinning between like 11 and 3 o'clock in the morning.
Really? That's just part of the deal.
I am not quite as easily attainable these days, but yeah, back in the beginning, yeah, right on the spot.
Yeah.
It was like I needed it. I wanted it so bad. Now I'm like, come on, guys, could you show up at like 6:30 in the morning instead before you leave town?
Yeah, no doubt. So, and I think this is the educational part for hunters, from a taxidermist point of view, and I think this is really important to go over. What should a hunter do with a bear or a deer or an elk? What is it? What is the ultimate scenario that a taxidermist would like to see, and how should that animal be prepared if you're going to try and mount it?
Honestly, like knife cuts and stuff like that, usually that's pretty easily repairable. So if you slip up and make a bad cut, or if your skinning cuts are off, a lot of times we can repair that. Probably one of the biggest things is just not getting it there quick enough. Basically, I always tell everybody you have to treat the hide as if you were going to eat it too. You don't roll it in the dirt. You don't let it sit in the back of the truck in the sun for 2 days while you're showing everybody that your deer head before you come to the taxidermist. You want to get it there as quick as possible.
Sure. So does that mean you want to just and I kind of know the answer to this, but do you want the hunter to salt it?
No. You cannot salt anything until it's been completely fleshed and turned out.
Okay. And generally, do you want the hunter to flesh it for you?
No. Usually just get it off the carcass like on a bear. Just get it off the carcass. 'Cause, I mean, like we get a lot of them brought in whole. Guys will throw it on a game cart and bring it out. But if you can't do that, and I understand there's places that's not going to happen. You can just skin it out, leave the head in it, leave the feet in it. Some states you have to take the skull out to present it to Fish and Game. So if you have to do that, you can look up a video and see how that process looks.
Right.
And then just keep it as simple as possible for yourself. If you shoot a coastal brown bear in the fall and it's got 200 pounds of fat and you have to carry it on your back, you might want to trim some off, but you don't have to get it down like we do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing is, like, a lot of guys, if you're like a lot of us, you kind of want to do everything. You want to do as much as you can. And, honestly, in my case, it almost feels like a little lazy. Like you're bringing a taxidermist something like, well, I could probably do that. But the problem is you end up creating potentially a ton more work, or potentially even something that's somewhat unfixable.
Yeah. Irreversible damage.
Yeah. That you're going to end up paying you an hourly rate to fix in the end versus just letting you do it right the first time.
Or replacing your cape.
Yeah.
Yeah. That happens quite a bit. We get a few of those every year where, the classic harvest your deer, then cut its throat to bleed it out right through the cape.
Really?
Oh, yeah. all sorts of stuff you see. Finish it off with a 300 Win Mag in the forehead from a foot away, and then bring it in to mount it. And you're like, I can't, we're hoping to save the face.
Right, right.
Yeah. So just, a lot of this very innocent mistakes. Like they didn't know. So yeah, we just try to inform, educate people as best we can when they're coming in.
Right. What's that proper care with that hide when they do shoot something? Let's say they shoot an elk in the Missouri breaks. It's hot. It's 80 degrees. It's archery season, and it's going to be 2 days to get to Libby from, Jordan, Montana with a mule deer or an elk. At that point they probably should cape it and get it off the head, right? Yes,
especially an elk. That head it holds so much heat in there. If you don't get the skull out of it, you're not going to have it in 2 days.
Yeah.
If you can get the head out, even if there's a little bit of meat left on the hide, clean it as best as you can, and then I would just lay it out overnight. Just let it whole thing open, laid out, like flesh side up, so that the air can just cool it off and dry it out a little bit. You don't want a whole bunch of liquid floating on top of it, so just try to cool it off as best you can every night. we see a lot of guys, they'll end up harvesting one and they'll skin it out, roll it up, and throw it in a cooler. Well, then all that heat from the fur, it insulates it so well, it'll rot in the middle before it ever cools off. Even in a freezer, if you just wad one up right away and throw it in the freezer before the body heat has a chance to get out of it, it'll absolutely rot before it freezes.
Really, even in the freezer.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, once someone lays it out and kind of gets that cooled down, is it okay at that point to roll it up and throw it in ice and water? Does it, like a bunch of water hurt it?
It's not good to have a bunch of water on it, but once you get it cooled off, I would just roll it up and stick it 2-3 bags and lay it on top of the ice in the cooler. Try to just keep it out of the water.
Okay, so that water kind of, does it soften that hide up?
It definitely gets it waterlogged, but once you have that moisture, that really helps bacterial growth start going again. If it's dry, then nothing will be growing on it.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, it was really interesting to see some of the capes and some of the hides and stuff that came into the taxidermist where I was at, and I saw a very small amount of it. But yeah, it's crazy and it's unfortunate because like if I shoot a deer, as much of the horns is part of the mount, so is the hide. Like,
yes,
that's the character of the deer, the way the face looks and the way the structure of the deer, and it's amazing to me how you can recreate that structure off of just a hide.
It is a little generic, but you have so many different measurements available for you today in your form selection. You can come very, very close. And then if you have like a mule that has a big Roman nose, you can see that on a test fit, then you can adjust and build that up.
What's the hardest animal you've ever had to mount?
Hardest animal I ever had to do was probably the first Cape buffalo I did. Trying to figure out how to do the wrinkles.
Yeah, because there's not much hair there, right? It's mostly skin.
Yeah, mostly skin. And most of the hides, when you get back from Africa, they lose a lot of the epidermal pigment on the top, so their skin's black. But then now it's just like white speckles everywhere.
Okay.
So, and like your form doesn't have hardly any detail in it, so you have all this baggy skin, and you can see where the wrinkles were. Trying to get that so it's not folds, because you don't you bend your neck, it's not a hard fold. It's a soft rolling wrinkle.
Yeah.
Trying to figure that out. Ears on the Cape buffalo, a lot of them are just gloved out, so they're just split to pieces, and you can't use like a traditional ear liner in them, so you have to make all your own ear liners and stuff. So
really,
yeah, that was a little frustrating, the first one I did.
Do you have the experience now and have it figured out to where if another one came in, you're like, oh, no problem?
Yeah, no problem now.
Really? Mm-hmm. What's the one that every single time it comes in now, it's like it's a big challenge? Not that you can't get it done, but like, okay, this is tough.
One that I'm always really super hypercritical of when I start out is probably still cats.
Okay.
Lions, African lions, leopards, mountain lions, bobcats, any cat. I'm always very, very critical about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and how it's turning out.
Is that because of that look on their face and their eyes and stuff?
Like a deer, I mean, you can get away with a lot on the deer family and have it still look nice, clean, anatomically correct. But on a cat, cats and dogs also, if you got like one shot at the look, and if it either looks just like a cat or a cartoon, there's not a lot of it's some of the greatest shitty taxidermy pictures you could ever hope to see is cats and dogs
100%.
and bears.
100%. I can say that. Cats, I think, would be number one.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to make a mountain lion look mean, but just smiling or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with the way their ears move and stuff, and how like the fold in the ear or not folded, depending on how aggressive it is, and the skin management, the way their face wrinkles up, and all the hair patterns. There's like a ton of very distinct hair patterns, so you can get them crooked, and it shows up just instantly.
As much as you deal with hair, I would think you would have like more nicely gelled, manicured hair on your own.
Once it started going white, I kind of gave up on it.
Yeah. That's crazy. Well, so now do people generally, do people kind of have their thing that they're known for, like cats or dogs, meaning wolves,
Yeah,
coyotes,
there's definitely guys that have specialized. One of the guys in Libby, where I'm from, he's known as the Cat Man. Phil Soucy, a world champion, phenomenal cats. Dale, that helped me with the rocks early on, he's a wild waterfowl guy, world champion. Just amazing guys. So yeah, Dwayne Dewey's one of the top premier sheep guys in the world. But there's definitely a long time to get to be specialized.
So I've heard of Susie up there. How does it work out that, because how many people live in Libby? A few thousand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How the hell does it end up with 2 world-class taxidermists in one town?
Well,
Did you guys learn in the same
No, Phil's quite a bit older than I am.
Okay.
No, there were still 4 really, really reputable shops in Libby just up till this spring. Then one guy retired.
Really?
There was 14 active shops between, guys doing it in their garage to a world champion when I first started.
Now, what is a world champion? How do you determine?
So they have the world show, and people come from all over, and they enter their piece and have categories. And best in world is like, it can be multiple animals, single animal, different species, and it's just the pick that is the absolute best executed art piece in the show.
Yeah, pull that sucker up there. So are these shows you've gone to and competed at?
Nope.
Never done that?
Never done that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember back when I was helping Jay in high school, he had gone before that time period. He wasn't going anymore, but it seemed almost like something he did when he was younger to like push himself and to go, I think quite frankly, it was a lot like knife shows were for me. It was a place to go and learn.
Yes.
And see, find materials and different suppliers, and then also learn from a lot of the people that are the best.
New techniques that you're just completely oblivious to, Yeah.
Yeah.
Seeing stuff that guys that are, seasoned career veterans in,
right,
what they're doing and you're not doing. You're like, I need to do more of that.
Right.
Yeah.
What would be, back to that question about kind of your thing, your area? What are you kind of known for? What would you consider that's kind of your area of expertise the most?
One of the things I'm probably most commonly sought out for is bears.
Really?
Do a lot of bears. I do a lot of wolves. That's probably the second most common thing I'm sought out for is wolves and coyotes and stuff.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you definitely live in bear country.
Yes.
Like some of the best. Yeah, southern Canada.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we'll probably end up with probably close to 80 for this spring.
No shit.
Mm-hmm.
How many guys do you have working for you?
There's 4 guys and me.
That's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember, like I said, I got the trash job when I was doing it, but it was just flesh and hides. And those bear hides, like not every bear hide is created equal. Sometimes they don't have any smell. They're easy to deal with. And then some were like crazy, greasy, slimy, and stunk like hell. And then it would drip all over my shoes. And I'd go back to my high school class. Because I was on a school to work program. So it'd be like, okay, from 11 to 1, you're going to go to Jay's.
Flesh bears.
And then from 1 to 3, whatever teacher gets you in like geography class, you come in and I have bear shoes on.
Right.
Oh my God. Yeah. But is that true with hides, that there's a lot of variation, or is that more just with bears?
Yeah, the deer, it's pretty much early season, late season, that's about it. But really it's all pretty clean, pretty common.
Yeah. Yeah, with the deer, you definitely learn about the glands.
Yes.
Where you grab a deer when you're gutting it out in the field.
Yeah.
God, your hands just stink like crazy, and
it doesn't come off for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you kind of smell like you're the buck and rut when you come home.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If she's lucky. What are you talking about? So did you grow up there in Libby?
Yeah. Yep.
You did.
Born and raised there.
Is that how Craig Kelly met you? We have a mutual friend.
So my best friend growing up is Craig's cousin. And so Craig was like our mentor to teach us how to coyote hunt and just general badassery.
Yeah. Yeah. Craig's quite the badass. Craig's the only guy I know that coyote hunts on foot, like tracks them down, like walks them down and shoots them. Yeah.
Yeah. He's an animal.
Yeah. He's crazy.
I think Craig would sell his soul for one more coyote.
He is definitely 100% the most insane. Of course, I haven't talked to him much here in the last couple of years. I see him once in a while. He stops in. He was a lineman actually, or still is a lineman where I worked, so I saw him every day. But we would get home from working like a storm or something, and we would get a rest period, right? So like if you get home at midnight, you get like a 4-hour rest period. So that means you don't really necessarily have to start till noon the next day. So most guys like, all right, I'm going to get home, sleep in a little, have a little late breakfast, and head to work at noon. we'd be rolling in at like 11:30 at night. Craig's like, "Want to go coyote hunting?" I'm like, "Yeah, when?" Right now. What? Where? Plains. He's like, "What are you talking about?" And he would take off in his truck after working all day and all night, take off his truck, drive up to Hot Springs, coyote hunt, walk all over hell, and drive back and be at the shop at noon. He's like, "Yeah, I got 3 coyotes."
Yep. That sounds just like Craig.
Yeah. It's like, dude, you're insane. So with the coyotes, you became known for coyote pillows.
Mm-hmm. Then it was probably very closely tied to my love for coyote hunting.
Really?
Just being out there, seeing them all the time and hunting them and harvesting them. And there was a lot of really bad coyote taxidermy. There still is a really lot of bad coyote taxidermy out there.
Yeah. Well, let's face it. Very few people really mount coyotes very often. Like, it doesn't seem like. Am I wrong?
There's quite a few coyotes out there that get mounted.
Really?
Especially now in my shop. Holy cow. Now there's a lot.
Well, now that you're kind of the coyote guy.
Yeah. I didn't see that one coming. Like, not at all. Out of all the things I do, I just really didn't see the
You're known for lions or giraffes or grizzly bears.
And I'm the pillow guy.
You're the coyote pillow guy.
Yeah. I was like, well, you got to be something, I guess.
Yeah. So the pillows are interesting because like you actually brought a bobcat down that you had done not for Ranella, but
Giannis.
Okay. You had brought a bobcat pillow, and it sounds weird. It sounds like it'd be just this soft, fluffy pillow out of maybe fur, but it's an actual mount where they're like this bobcat in particular is laying on the couch as if you walked in from work. And the cat like looks up from his nap and he's sitting there with his head looking at you. Of course, with a cat look on its face, it's like, even house cats, like, I would kill you if I was big enough.
Right.
It's pretty much the look on
Always
all
on a
cats'
cat.
face. Yeah. Dogs are like, "Hey,
I missed you.
you've been gone for a while." Cats are like, "Yeah, I can't eat him today, but I'm going to maybe tomorrow."
If I find them on the floor in the morning, I'm going to eat them.
But your coyote pillow or your pillows, like with that bobcat, it looks like a real bobcat, like a pet bobcat laying on the couch. How did the pillow thing come along, and how did you come up with that idea?
We got talked into it at a shop I was working at in Libby back 20 years ago-ish, and a guy wanted a soft-mounted coyote, and we were like, absolutely not. It'll look terrible.
Yeah, because for people that don't know, most mounts have like hard foam in them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you lay them down on the couch, they're just super stiff, hard,
right?
Nothing soft really about it except for the hair.
Yep, that'd be the only thing soft or movable. Just be brushing the hair back and forth.
But these mounts are actually like you push on them and they're softer, like a pillow.
Like a pillow.
So how did that?
He tried talking us into it for about an hour, and we were like, we'll just mount one on a rigid form, bed it down, like laying down, curled up. And he's like, nope, I want it soft so I can move it around. And finally, we were like, all right, we'll try it. So we did one, and it was
just stuff him full of newspapers or what?
Now we used polyester.
Okay.
And then we mounted the head, used just a regular coyote head we had floating around, and put it together, and then the guy stiffed us.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So we had this
and you probably had more time than that
looking coyote thing in the shop. Well, then there's a car show in Libby every year, and it was hot August nights, and this guy shows up just checking out the taxidermy shop, and he sees this thing, and he's like, oh my God, that is so cool. And we're like, oh, really? You're the first person that thought it was cool. He's like, can I borrow it for the car show? He's like, I'd like to curl it up and put it on this passenger seat of my hot rod when people are going to the show. We're like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So he took it, and then we had about 3 other people come up that wanted them for their hot rods. And basically it just took off from there, from the car show.
Really?
One of them had a connection with the airport store, the Parody Shops, and they're in about every major airport in the country. And they wanted one for that store in Spokane. And then they started going to Arizona and Texas, and we've shipped them all over the country now.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's weird because like the head is like it's actually and the neck and stuff is actually like movable.
Mm-hmm.
Like
it's all in how you feather the polyester up onto it. It's a traditional head, just like your deer head. So we can set the eyes and tuck your lips and everything, and use like full cast ear liners on it and stuff. So it's like a quality traditional mount, except for the body. And that's just formed while the skin's wet.
Yeah.
And they let it dry. Then it always has a tendency to go back to that curled up pose.
That's wild. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, you literally can scare the shit out of people with them. If you walk up on somebody and they look around, they look that real. It's pretty cool. I remember Craig, we were linemen and we're working and he's like, tell me about this buddy that makes coyote pillows. And I had like a vision in my mind of just a fluffy pillow, you know? And I was like,
square pillow.
Yeah, a square pillow. And I was like, okay. And then he's telling me, because he's shooting all these coyotes, and he's like, yeah, I sell a bunch of them to my buddies making these coyote pills, and you should really see them. I'm like, it's a fucking fuzzy pillow. Like, whatever.
Who gives a shit?
Yeah. And then the first time I saw one, I'm like, holy shit. Like, when he says a coyote pill, it's the whole animal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had no idea.
Well, it was, a little bit of people knew about them, but it was never really out there for us. And then Clay Newcomb was at my shop a couple years ago, and we were doing a FaceTime call with Steve. And right when Steve was getting off the phone, he's like, hey, Clay, before you leave, find out what's up with the coyote staring at me in the back of the shop there. So we get off the phone, and Clay's like, what is that? And I showed him, I was like, you can push on it, it was soft. I think I said squishy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the 2 million views of me saying squishy. That was like, that's the word I picked. But so he does this little video of me explaining what it is. And then he takes off, and like 2 days later, he calls me up and he's like, I don't know if you're going to be really happy or really pissed off at me. And I was like, for what? And he's like, I posted that video on TikTok. And I was like, TikTok for kids? And like, well,
yeah.
I had no idea. And he's like, oh, no. He's like, a lot of people are on TikTok, man. A lot of people.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. How'd it do? He's like, I've never posted anything that went like that. He's like, I believe that's what they would say. It went viral. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks. So I get off the phone and I get home and I talk to my daughter and I'm like, hey, there's a video on TikTok of me with one of the coyote pillows. And Clay said it went viral. She's like, really? Like in 2 days, it went to 2.2 million views.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I had 800 emails when I got down to the shop.
Seriously?
Yeah. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I had to hire, that's how I ended up with my secretary.
Really?
Yeah, so I got, Taryn works for, she's one of my employees' wives. And I was like, you want to come be my secretary?
Yeah.
And I had just had a baby. So Lakeland was, I think, probably 5-6 months old at that time. So I was like, yeah, bring her to work, man. So we've had babies in the shop, and they just had another one. So we'll have 2 in there before long now.
Yeah.
But it's just like whatever we had to do to keep the show going, and Taryn's been a total asset. Absolutely one of my most valuable employees I got. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so a bunch of those emails actually turned into orders then?
Oh yeah.
Because sometimes you worry about like all that viral stuff and then you shoot them a price and then they're gone,
Yeah, no, they were very receptive with the prices.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we ended up having to search the whole country trying to find decent coyotes. You can't have like southern coyotes that don't have any hair. I need all the northern prime winter coyotes. So yeah, I ended up buying them out of Michigan and Wyoming and Montana and just anywhere I could find them just to fill the orders.
It's interesting. And I don't know if these guys are going to start trapping again or not, but my buddy Todd, he lives just several hundred yards from me here, but he traps coyotes and like that's their thing. And this is the first winter they didn't do it because the prices were so low that it wasn't even worth them.
Yeah, it was totally in the tank.
Yeah. He was like, it's not even worth the gas. But each of the last couple winters before that, they'd trapped over 100 coyotes. And and he does a beautiful job of turning everything. He gets everything completely fleshed out, turns them, puts them on boards, gets them stretched and dry to where they would probably keep for years just in that state without even being tanned. I mean, they're like, I can only describe the inside of the skin on them like really fine paper.
Yes, it absolutely like paper, like parchment.
Yes, like parchment paper, and they're pretty rigid. Like they pretty much would stand in the corner.
All stood up on their nose.
Yeah, and for the first few years that they were trapping around here, he was frustrated because they were getting pretty shitty coyotes, kind of red bellies on them, and just I think the fleas are really bad and stuff here, and a lot of mange. And then he started trapping over around Drummond, and was just getting big, giant, beautiful coyotes.
dogs. Yeah.
I mean, beautiful, huge dogs, and quite a few foxes and several wolves. And but with the fur prices, like I guess that might potentially kind of help you with like buying the hide.
Oh yeah, I love it when the fur prices go down.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to obtain good hides.
Yeah. So then do you stock up a little bit during times like that?
Yeah, if we can get the right specimens. So
Yeah.
like you're saying, if they got the red bellies or they're flea bit up or they have any mange to them or rubbed out from breeding, I don't buy them.
Yeah.
So like if you harvested one that had mange and was flea bit and brought it to me to mount it, that's fine. That was your call. But if you call and order one from me, it has to look like the other ones I got. I can't like slough in subpar
It's got to
hides.
be perfect.
That's pretty much what dictates how many we sell. Is how many good hides can we get?
Are most of your coyote pillows something that are hides you buy?
Yep.
Okay. Interesting.
Or I used to go get my own, but that doesn't happen that much anymore.
Yeah. Well, there's not the amount of time it takes, you're probably better off actually working.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
But yes.
Yeah. Too bad hunting didn't pay more.
Right.
How did you get into taxidermy?
Well, my dad took me to pick up a deer head when I was 8 years old. And I went into this guy's shop and I was just absolutely fascinated by it. I was just like, oh my God, that's the coolest shit I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I told my dad we left. I was like, I'm going to be a taxidermist when I grow up. And he was like, oh yeah, well, cute. Good luck.
Yeah.
And I was just, I never forgot that. I always wanted to go. And as soon as I got a driver's license, I just basically stalked all the guys in town until one of them gave me a job, like fleshing and sweeping floors
Right there
and
in Libby.
salting.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much my intro into it.
Yeah. The salting, that's all that salting and rubbing that all into them and then changing out all the crappy salt. Yeah, those are definitely the first jobs, fleshing and salting, that you get.
Mm-hmm.
Jay wouldn't really, he was big on, he personally was doing his own salting because it was so important. He wanted to make sure it was getting done right. But
it's absolutely very crucial. But like I always tell when we get somebody new, I'm like, all you have to do is just make sure there's salt on all of it.
On all of it.
On all of it. Like don't miss any. As long as you get salt on all of it, we're good.
Yeah.
Inevitably, they miss it.
Yeah.
Like, there's all of it, not 90% of it, So you always have to watch really close when you're first breaking somebody in on it.
So what year or how old were you when you got paid to actually mount your first animal?
15 was when I first started. And
really?
Actually working, yeah.
So you were in high school when you were...
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I worked there through high school and just out of it. And then his business went away. And then
Did you ruin it?
No, that one wasn't me. He got in trouble for...
That's where all those John Hayes first bad mounts went. That poor bastard. Drove him right out of business.
Right. Yeah, he had his own troubles. And,
yeah.
So when I was faced with I could go down that path or a different path, I went helicopter logging.
Oh, you really?
Mm-hmm.
Hook and chokers or what?
Yep.
That's not dangerous.
So the last crew I worked on, there was Paul Bryant was our pilot, and then there was Dirk and Steve and me and Mike, and I'm the only one left alive out of that crew right now.
No shit.
Mm-hmm.
All killed doing that?
One was not.
Really?
He was in a car wreck.
Damn. Yeah, that logging's dangerous enough just logging off of like a skyline machine or, behind a skidder or whatever, just falling and hook and chokers and stuff just in general. But then you add the helicopter element into it.
Oh yeah. It was always something. I mean, always.
Was that right there around Libby you were doing that?
No, because you ended up like I worked in Washington and Idaho and Oregon, Montana. So you're always traveling, following the bird around.
Yeah.
Until it crashes or something. And then you wait to get a new bird and go back.
A new bird and a new pilot.
We lost one of my friends that was like a coworker friend. He ended up dying in a crash on the job there. When
really?
We were hooking over in Skycomish, just out of Seattle.
No shit. Wow. That's some crazy work. How long did you do that?
About not quite 3 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you decided no matter how hard taxidermy is, it's got to be easier than helicopter logging.
Well, it was just like, it was probably about a year before I left. We had it was in Skycomish. We were over there, and I was hooking a turn up to the helicopter, and the masthead separated while I was holding onto the hook. So it was like, boom, and it sounded like a gun went off, and then the hook hit the ground, and all the cables started pouring over me. And I finally got my arms up to get out from underneath the cable, and we were logging. It was like we were probably like third cut logging out there. It was like there was still old train tracks from where they're using steam donkeys back in the way old days.
Really?
So there was a couple of the big springboard stumps where this one had a bunch of sweep in it. So they used a springboard to get above that sweep because there's hand fall and everything back then.
Yeah.
And so that stump was just right off the side of the logs I was standing on where I was hooking the chokers up to the aircraft. And so when I got out from underneath the cable, and then I looked out in front of me, and there was that stump. So I just dove off of there and crawled in behind that stump. And when I looked up from behind the stump, the aircraft had just got the skid hooked up on the top of the canopy of trees and turned over upside down, and it was coming in, nose in, upside down, like right on me. And so there was nothing you could do, and it happened so fast. I mean, it's not like I had a lot of time to think about shit. I was surprised I was clever enough to hide behind the stump, So it hit the ground, like nose in, and door blew off, took a big chunk of the stump off I was hiding by, and the tail rotor snapped off and popped open the fuel cells. So it just spraying Jet A, just like a water fountain, just spraying Jet A all over me. And it's running wide open. I mean, just balls out, wide open, unrestricted. And finally it sucked air after just a couple seconds, since the fuel cell had been compromised. And the engine died out, and the flames started going down. But it was just starting to catch shit on fire around me. And then it finally died out. And it was probably, it wasn't very long, probably like 10 seconds or so. Like everything just finally calmed down. And I stepped out from behind the stump and couldn't believe I made it. And all of a sudden you could hear something. It was like wind, It was like, I was like, what the fuck is that? And I look up to the trees, and you can see the rotor system, and it's starting to spin back down.
The rotors are still up there?
Yeah, the masthead separated.
Oh, so the masthead of the actual helicopter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when he was
holy shit,
when he was holding a hover there above me, and I was hooking the chokers up, it just pow snapped off, and the rotor system took off to God only knows how high up, and he crashed, and then they spiraled back down and landed a couple hundred yards away from me out in the unit.
Really?
So
killed the pilot?
Yeah, he didn't make it on that one.
Damn.
Yeah, it was too bad. It was just a total shitty turn of events for the guy. Amazing guy, super nice guy. He actually had one of the funniest quotes I'd ever, especially at that time in my life. He was a very, very clever guy. And I'd worked under him for about 2 weeks, but I'd never met him in person. He'd just talk all day on the radio. Then he would go to service at night, then we'd go back to the motel. So we'd never actually met in person.
Okay.
So I go down one night, we're at service, and I get a meat bill. And he's my dad's age. He was a Vietnam vet. And he smokes Pall Mall cigarettes, like filterless Pall Mall cigarettes. And he's sitting there, and he lights one up and takes a big drag off it and just yaks a lung up. And I looked at him, and I was like, Jesus, Bill, they make cigarettes with filters now. He's like, smoking a cigarette with a filter, like sucking tit through a sweater. That's 30 years ago. I was like, I still to see him sitting there saying that. He was just an absolute hilarious guy, super nice guy.
Yeah.
And we were supposed to have a new aircraft when we finished the job in Libby, and we're gonna have a new aircraft for the company when we got over to Washington. And he was supposed to be on leave for 2 weeks. Well, we get there, and it's the same helicopter and Bill, and he just bad timing.
Damn.
It was the mechanical failure. They didn't pick it up. It was fractured on the inside of the masthead, so it wasn't like showing through the paint or anything when they examined it. They examine it every hour and a half or so when they do the service.
Really?
And never saw it. And finally, one day, it just had a complete failure.
Wow. And were you the only guy on the ground, or did you have help?
There was 3 hookers and myself.
Nobody got hurt?
Nope, just Bill.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn. Yeah, so was that the time you were like, okay, I'm done with this career?
No, I decided I was going to tough it out. And
slow learner.
Yeah, very slow. And so we we got a new aircraft, and we flew to Oregon, and we started working down there. And that went pretty smooth, although I was really jumpy. Like if I heard any sort of pop or fart on that helicopter, I was just sprinting out to the brush, look up and run.
Really?
And they're like, it's okay, John, you can come back. So I'd go back, and everything went great. And we ended up in Idaho over by Coeur d'Alene and 4th of July Pass.
Yep. And
we started having the master caution was like popping lights on and off and on and off. So they've been fighting, trying to figure out what was wrong with that for a while. And then one day we were up there, and I was hooking a turn up, and the pilot, Mark, he's like, get out of the way, get out of the way, get out of the way. And so I just split, and he punched the line off, and he had a total failure, and then crashed it up there by the 4th of July Pass. Crashed that. When he walked away from it, he was able to auto-rotate a little bit at least, but he ended up landing out in a stump patch and it goes clear cut, so
No shit.
total the aircraft there.
Damn. How do you, as a pilot, how do you get back in a bird and say, well, let's do this again tomorrow?
Most of the guys, I think the only guy ever I probably worked under at least a dozen different pilots, maybe a few more. One guy was not a Vietnam pilot. All of them had crashed previous to me meeting them.
Yeah.
And crashed afterwards and during, and yeah.
Yeah, you listen to have you ever listened to the Jocko podcasts with, I don't know if you ever listen to podcasts, but you better listen to this one, damn it. But the Jocko Willink, his podcast, he's had John Stryker Meyer on. He was one of the SOG warriors, veteran from Vietnam, and I can't remember John Stryker Meyer, and I think another one was Thompson. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he had a few different guys on that. He had a guy named Sal that was more of an actual Vietnamese guy that was working, with these guys, serving with them. Anyway, the point is they would talk about, they would be inserted, and then they would get into contact or whatnot, and they would call in a prairie fire emergency, and these helicopter pilots, they were flying the King Bees, would come flying in and pick those guys up under unbelievable amount of fire, unbelievable, and they're flying into the jungle, and they're pulling those guys out on strings, and the shit that they were doing, and the amount of bullet holes that were in those choppers when they finally got back to base, like, it's just absolutely mind-boggling. And he says, they talk about the helicopter pilots, and he was like, that they are the only reason that any of them ever made it out alive, but they flew straight into ungodly amount of fire.
Well, most of the aircraft, so I did hook under a few of the bigger class of ships, but most of what I hooked under was the Hueys. And so the brand new Huey we got that we crashed in Idaho, you could still see the little square sheet metal patches over the strafing gunfire up the side.
Really?
Of them. Oh yeah. Well, one of them still had the harness for the door gunner in it and stuff. Those are our new ships.
Yeah. Yeah. The stories, those, if you're ever interested in just having your earbuds in while you're fleshing bears or working in the shop, those podcasts are some of the best I've ever listened to. And,
really?
And everybody of this era, especially younger people, should have to listen to those to hear what that was like. I mean,
just hell.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And they're in the jungle. They're under, triple canopy, cloud cover, a lot of times rain for days. So then the pilots, nobody could fly in and get them, even when they were in trouble. Mm-hmm. And, pitch dark, terrible conditions, hiking around in the jungle that you can't see 3 feet in, and then fighting war and shooting at each other within feet. Like, you can hear the people, talking and shit that you're shooting back and forth with.
Right.
Just mind-boggling. But definitely those pilots, everybody from the guys on the ground all the way through to the pilots were absolutely incredible, And you got a guy like Jocko that was in the Battle of Ramadi and, has done a lot in his own career, and he's going, no freaking way, dude. Like, that's that shit. We don't do that shit today.
Yeah.
Just it's kind of similar to some of the stuff you see going on in Ukraine right now with the trench warfare. And it's like, all of a sudden we're back in World War I.
Yeah. Right.
Like, these guys are fighting 50 feet apart in trenches for days on end. It's just mind boggling, tanks, and it's crazy. And on the other side of the world, I'm taking my girl to a softball tournament.
Right.
It's like, we definitely live in a great country. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Yes.
So you got done helicopter logging. What made you push into, when did you actually think you could make taxidermy a full-time living?
Honestly, I didn't for a while. There was, like I said, we were so saturated, and it wasn't like it was a poor group of guys that did poor quality work and were barely surviving. I mean, we had literally some of the best artists in the country in our town. So I just kind of was like, I don't know how in the hell I'm ever going to get that together. And then finally I got a chance to go work for another guy in Libby who had a fantastic shop and a good reputation. And we talked for a while. I was in college at that time, and I had about 4 or 5 credits left to get my associate's degree. And he's like, if you want the job, you need to be here next week. And I was like, all right. So I bailed out of school and packed my shit up and came back to Libby. And
Were your parents impressed?
they weren't surprised at all.
Really?
No, not at all. They were like, okay. They knew it was something I always wanted to do, but like I said, it just seemed like it was going to be very, very difficult unless I moved somewhere that had nobody there. Then, of course, there'd be the part where there's nobody there.
Yeah.
So no work.
What year was that?
2003.
Okay, so that's really pre-internet. I mean, the internet's kind of around at that point, but like no one's really like building big business off of that. So like your mindset is definitely local.
Yes.
Your mindset isn't national. I mean, you've become nationally recognized, especially with, well, after you're on this podcast, you're going to be famous. but you know, with some of the work you've done with Renell and whatnot, obviously that and other things you've done that makes the internet has made the world a lot smaller. But back then, you're counting on guys that are shooting animals in your area.
Yeah.
Right?
And then
for the most part.
And like I said, there's 14 shops. From best in world to I just started the other day and don't know what I'm doing, but I'm still here.
Right.
So you can only slice the pie so many ways, you know, and that all would have been after the winter in 96, 97, where we lost so much of our deer and elk population. So that like the numbers that were coming into the shops that were well established was even substantially cut. And so I figured if I could ever get into a good shop and get good instruction, then I could make it. So then, like I said, I dropped out of school and I was like, I'm all in. So I worked there until I finally, he was ready to retire and I took over the business.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Okay. So you just worked there until he was, and that seems like the best path to be able to, you know, to just continue work and getting experience. And then when you take over, you're also taking over a big client list. You're not trying to separate and take people away from him or.
Right. It was just a nice clean break. He went his way and I went my way. And that gave me the chance to start doing some of the stuff that I wanted to do, the things I wanted to see, the direction I wanted to go.
Yeah.
But that's like, you know, it's taken forever, but we're finally making it now.
When did you take over completely?
I went out on my own completely in 10.
Okay. All right. So, 13 years ago. Yeah. And how has that been like, have you been able to take it in a direction you've really wanted to? And is that? Yeah,
it's been like it, there was definitely about, 7-8 years into it. I was just like, we're getting much better. I had an opportunity to have a few guys come into my shop and work with me and teach me some stuff. The whitetails, the only reason my whitetails look at all respectable is a guy named Scott Brewer. Scott's, just champion whitetail guy, very innovative when he was doing his stuff. I mean, the stuff that he did 20 years ago still looks fantastic, unlike the shit I did 20 years ago where I'm like, oh God, I hope nobody knows I did that.
Yeah, Frankenstein.
Yeah. So I was just very lucky I had some guys that were really forthcoming with that knowledge that allowed me to build stuff up because it felt like I was, I don't know if it's the same for you, but as a craftsman making something, you hit a wall. Like you don't actually know where to go from where you're at. Like I'm like, I want to do different stuff, but I actually have no idea on how to do that now.
Yeah, I think it's very, very similar, especially in the custom world thing. And I say it all the time. The only reason I got as good as I did as quickly and as young and whatnot is because people were willing to share and teach. Like if you're just left to your own devices, and that was back before the internet too. So there wasn't YouTube. Like, you can YouTube how to do anything, and I'm 100% sure you can get online and YouTube how to be a taxidermist. Like, that information today did not exist 15, 20 years ago.
No.
It's really been in the last 5 to 10 years that's just blown up.
Yeah.
So back then you did have to have somebody willing to actually show you. And I actually think today the problem is actually a little bit of the opposite. People count on YouTube and the internet, which is a great resource, but there's so many little tips and tricks that I'm sure you do in your shop that you wouldn't put on a film or a video, not because you're hiding it, you just don't think about it.
Right.
And there's a little question if you're teaching me that I might ask you that leads us down a little bit of a rabbit hole. That's it's $1 million trick, or the way you customized a tool, something you did that's like, you just can't include, no matter how good your video is of how to mount a deer, there's just going to be little things that like, well, but in this situation, or well, hold on a minute. I got a knife cut right through the eyelid of a deer or something like.
How do I hide that?
Yeah, right. So like you thought you've learned everything, and then something new comes up, and that's where working with somebody in person. And what I really respect about you, just even during this podcast, is you make a point of naming names of people that helped you, and that's why I always try to name Rick Dunkerley when I talk. And there's been other guys, Don Fogg and Steve Schwarzer and Tim Hancock, all these guys I always try to name. I don't know that it really matters to a lot of those guys are retired, so it probably doesn't matter, but it's just more out of respect.
Yes.
That you call out those guys, and that way they're also not forgotten. They're given some credit.
And it is what helped me get to where I'm at now. And if they had just, kept clammed up or told me to leave or no, I'm not going to help you, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. So I definitely am very grateful for those guys.
Yeah, once you give them a little shout out, and quite honestly, if any of those guys are still active or other people, it might be a guy younger than you that figures something out, and you learn a trick from him.
Oh yeah.
But if you give him a shout out on a podcast like this, or on with Ranella or wherever, and he sees or hears that, he's going to be more apt to want to share something with you tomorrow that he learns.
Or the next young guy that's just dying for some knowledge. So like, I have no idea. Can you throw me a bone on something?
Right.
So yeah, just thank you for all the support.
Yeah.
And continue just being you and being helpful,
Right. So I asked you what your hardest animal was to deal with. What's your favorite? What do you like to mount the most?
Honestly, anymore, I don't know if it's actually like a specific species of animal. I enjoy doing pretty much any mount that is technical, abstract, something dynamic. Even like your base, I've never done one like that. So it's just something I can really dive into and try new things, work on stuff, refine different things. That's probably my favorite thing now.
Yeah.
Just something detailed, something that I've got a good staff and they can do most all the work. But when you get neat custom pieces, I really enjoy doing the custom pieces.
Yeah. The typical kind of wall shoulder mount, deer, whitetail deer,
bear rug, just all your traditional elk mounts,
Right. Yeah, and that, for me, that question, I would get that, and it got to a point, and I had phases in my career where my favorite thing to make was like a folding knife, I went through phases because I was in big learning stretches on that particular thing.
Yeah, where you get a new tip, and it like changed the whole way you did the process.
Yeah,
you're like, oh my God, this revolutionized it. And now it's like just a little something.
Yes. But now when I was more active with making customs, what I liked was actually variation where I could do, but what I really liked was having free reign. So like, I don't really care if it's a folding knife. I don't care if it's a dagger or a Bowie knife. I don't really care what it is. Are they willing to let me kind of go deep and do something cool and special?
Right. Yep. That's absolutely what my passion is now. Just something unique and special, and I can just get lost in it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's super cool. Well, what do you get any time hunting in the field yourself?
Not a lot. Usually I might hunt for like maybe a week of the season.
Yeah.
Usually we make a trip, take my wife and daughter and my dad. We'll all head over to the east side there, and we'll go elk hunting for a couple of days, then come back and then go out with my girls and do a little, Saturday morning hunt and hustle back so I can be at the shop.
Yeah. Do any of your kids have interest in helping in the shop at all?
I don't know. My daughter wants to be a lawyer, so
she's smarter than you.
Yes. So like, you got out of high school, my smart buddies went to college, and I went to work. She's kind of hopefully going to college.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, that's cool. Yeah, it's definitely it feels like it has to be a passion, and then someday maybe it turns into a profitable business. But much like making knives, I think it's so similar. There's so many guys out there trying in their garage. There's so many guys out there trying to mount deer or doing whatever they're doing in their garage. And also there's so many really good, reputable knife makers or taxidermists out there that really are actually doing great work. And a bunch of them are actually not charging enough. That was the frustrating thing is I would go to a show and you would see a dude who's an engineer for the railroad, and he's making $120,000 a year. and he's making great knives, but he basically just wants the cost of his materials back out of it.
You're like, oh man, you're killing me.
Yeah, it's like you're charging $200 for that knife, and it should be $2,000. You know,
Right.
but it's such a long learning curve to get to the point where I know for myself, I was just trying to get to a point where I could get hey, good job from a guy that I thought was a master.
Yes.
You know, I'm sure like the guys that taught you, like how long was it until you mounted something where they were like, damn, that's a good job.
Oh, my first one with Scott, he was working at another shop in town, and I got the chance to meet him. And he, like I said, he was a very, very big figure in the taxidermy world. And I was like, oh my God, I would love to meet this guy. So I got a chance to meet him, and I'd seen an instructional video he had done through one of the supply companies. And he's a big guy. You could tell he's a big guy. And then I finally get to meet Scott in person, and he's like 6'3", 240-pound guy, and like muscular. He was a SARS instructor and stuff. So he's a very, very jacked dude. So I meet this guy, and he's very dry at first. You know, Scott's very dry. And I was like, hey, it's super nice to meet you. I'm John Hayes. You know, I got my own shop. You know, I'm going to do my own thing. And I was wondering if you could come out and look at a deer head I did. I was like, I'm kind of hitting a wall, and I'd really value your opinion if you could stop by. And he's like, all right, where you at? So I give him directions. He gets off at work and comes out. So I make sure I've got my shops all cleaned up real nice, you know, and he walks through the front door, and I got it on the stand at the back wall. So right when you walk in, boom, there it is. And it's probably 25 feet away from the door at that point. So he comes in, opens the door, and he looks around the shop and looks over, and he's like, is that the deer? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, that sucks. It's just straight up. He's like, that sucks. And I was like, really? I was like, are you sure? Like, I was like, do you need to get any closer to it? And he's like, no, I can tell it sucks from here. I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, could you be more specific?
Yeah.
And he was like, do you really want to know? He's like, you're not going to be all butthurt about it. Be like, well, I like doing it like that. I was like, no. I was like, shit, I thought you were going to give me like a gold sticker or some shit. You know, I was like, I thought you were just going to be like, wow, great job.
Yeah.
So then he came over and started telling me what to do. And I was like, I got another one I'm going to be doing in a couple of days. I said, would you come back out? And he's like, yeah, I'll swing back by. So I did that one. And he came out, and he's like, still sucks, but you know, you're getting on the right track. So then I ended up doing a bunch of different deer mounts, and he'd come out and look at them. And then finally I got a chance. He came out and worked for me for about 3 months. And that was great.
Really?
And I get along very well with Scott. He's a nice guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a great story from across the room.
Yeah, from like almost 30 feet away. He was like, that sucks. Like, oh, shit.
Yeah, but that's the same kind of feedback. Like, I remember being, as a kid, super frustrated, not being able to get approval. Like, God, am I ever going to do something good enough? You know, right. But if you can't take that criticism and truly, like, actually mean what you say when you say, like, yeah, I know, I want you to tear this down.
Yeah, I need to know.
Yeah, then if you can't take that, then you're not going to get better.
No.
And that's one thing I saw a lot of guys were pretty good at but it was interesting. Like, you get, it's an awkward situation. I'm sure you get it too, where you're somewhere and you're like, you know, somebody's like, oh, my brother does taxidermy. He did my deer. Come look at it. Come look at this. What do you think? And it's like, I generally am like, oh yeah, it's pretty good.
Nice
it looks
buck.
good.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, no, really, like, he's trying to get better. Like, what do you really think? And then it's always that question of like,
do you really?
do you really want to know, like, for real?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to think I'm a dick,
right,
if you don't. And it's like, and sometimes people are just like, nope, 100%. And you get the people that kind of argue with you about the why behind whatever they're doing. It's like, okay.
Well, no, I like it like that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, then that's great. You know, that's pretty much the end of it at that point.
Yeah.
You know, you're like,
but
alrighty
that's
then.
Not what a deer looks like. Yeah, but I like it that way.
I like it like that.
Yeah. You just started your own breed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't take the criticism, I don't think it would matter what your trade is. If you can't take that criticism and grow from it, you're just going to grow stagnant.
Yeah. Yeah. You just started a breed called the whitetail elk. Good job. And those things start running around, you're going to be the best in the country out of them.
Yeah. Have the market cornered.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to be the go-to whitetail elk person. Yeah. Do you have some cool projects coming up? Do you have some animals you've had come in that you're excited to get after?
I'm actually just finishing up a really beautiful Yukon moose for the guys from Schnee's Boot Company.
Oh, cool.
And it's a half life size. It'll be in a charging pose. We got the head dropped and everything, and it looks like it's running in a little bit of a turn out of the wall. Got the head tilted up. It's got one of the rear palms has got a big cup in it, like from when it was still in velvet. The weight of it started cupping down, so we tilted that one up so you can see it when you walk in.
Really?
Yeah, so that's been a fun one.
When will that be down there?
I'll probably be taking that down there this month.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. I'm close. Wow. I'm close.
Yeah, very cool. Well, we'll have to check that out. Yeah, the Schnee's Boot Company right there on Main Street in Bozeman. That's where I used to go hang out when I was in college and couldn't afford anything in the store.
Right. You're like, man, that's some cool shit.
Go look at some boots. Go look at some Filson gear.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that's really nice. I'm going to stick with my Walmart camo. Yeah, I'm just a broke college kid.
Yep.
I was probably spending enough on beer and gas for duck hunting at that point. I could have bought anything in there, but my priorities were mixed
different.
Up.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming down and delivering the deer.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I love coming down
doing
here.
The podcast. Actually, tell me about how did you get linked up with Ranella and MeatEater?
So it's a bizarre turn of events. A guy in Libby this is a long way around the horn here too for this shit. This guy in Libby, he shot a bear with an outfitter in Canada. And he brought it to me, and it was a huge black bear. I mean, it was huge. It's one of the biggest black bears I've ever seen. And so he brings it to me. Well, the outfitter up there was really impressed with this bear. And the guy's name was Bob Morrison, and he ran Bear Pro Safaris. And so Bob was actually pretty concerned that some putz was going to get this bear from his camp and ruin it. So he gets back in touch with the hunter and says, who'd you take it to? And he's like, took it to John Hayes. And he's like, what's his phone number? So I get this like cold call from this Canadian outfitter, and he starts just grilling the shit out of me. I'm like, what am I doing? Do I know how to do it? And all this shit. And I was like, yeah, man, I got it. I was like, I love doing these bears. So he kept checking in on it, I get it all done, and I emailed him some pictures, and he was super impressed with it. He was very, very happy.
Yeah. And
so he was like, I'm going to have more bears up here for clients. He's like, would you be willing to do my clients' work if they're U.S. citizens, and they're like, you just take care of it and we'll go from there. He's like, I'll just freeze them and then you come pick them up. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to. So Bob and I started talking back and forth. He was probably mid-70s at that point, and he'd been an outfitter forever. I mean, just an old salty outfitter, man. He was a great guy, super funny guy. And so he'd call me frequently. We'd shoot the shit a little bit about bear hunting and taxidermy and whatnot. And one day he's like, I met this guy. He's like, remarkable young man. He's like, very standout. He's like one of the most standout young guys I've ever met in my entire career. He's like, I think you should meet him. And I was like, okay, cool. That sounds great. So he gives Clay Newcomb my phone number. Mm-hmm. He Clay's. So we ended up talking, just had a idle conversation. We ended up talking a couple more times, and then Clay wanted to come to Montana. He's been on a quest for a Montana black bear at that time for a while. And I was like, you should come up to Libby. It's a great spot. So he ended up coming up with one of the founders of Best of the West.
Okay.
So they brought mules up. They went out and hunted. Unfortunately, they didn't get anything on that hunt. But Clay and I ended up staying in a little closer contact after that.
Yeah.
And then Clay ended up getting hired by the MeatEater guys with Ranella. And then Clay was bear hunting in Missoula with Steve, and they got a bear, and Clay had a chance to run it to me, and Steve had to run back to Bozeman. So he ended up bringing it to my shop, and then we did the FaceTime call and saw the coyote pillow and went over doing a closed mouth bear rug. Mm-hmm. And so then that was just that all the way around from, actually was the guy that owned Ace Hardware in Libby at the time. That's how I got steered all the way over to Steve.
Yeah, it's funny how that world works, the tangled web of connections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's really cool what you did here. Gosh, that was just this last winter when you went down with Steve and you guys did some breaking down a bison with stone tools and.
Oh yeah,
wasn't it your job to clean up the bones? Is that right? Or
yep, we ended up taking the skeleton back and did the entire skeleton.
Yeah, it's cool because I've listened to a couple podcasts where he talks about that, and they tried breaking down, or they did. You guys did break down, right, a bison, and then they were comparing the marks on the bones.
Yep, the tool marks,
because they used modern day made stone tools, right, to try to emulate the ones of old. Is that right, or
Correct.
were they using old ones?
No, they actually used like regional specific chert, and then napped all the tools out from that same type of chert that they found at the other site. And so they made all these points, and we went out there and they harvested Bridger bison, harvested one of their bulls for us. And then we skinned it, gutted it, quartered it, and boned it out.
Cool. Yeah, that's a cool little project. That's the thing that's cool about Steve. Like, even when I went down and had dinner with him and we were talking, he's very inquisitive.
Yes.
You can tell he's, you can see why he's a writer. He seems to like think deeper and think about things and ask questions and truly be like, the first time I met him down there, Brandon and I were there, and we just sat in the office for at least an hour and just talked before we ever got down to any kind of business stuff we were there to talk about and whatnot, which I really liked. Like, he's a very inquisitive person.
Yes. Honestly, the entire group there that I've had a chance to be around, it's an exceptional group of people.
Yeah.
I was very nervous when I went down there for the first introduction. I was just like, holy shit. I'm going to sound like an idiot, which I may have now. I'm getting more comfortable with it, I guess. But I got down there, I was really nervous, and every single person there was very nice. They're like, it's all right, man, just relax, and yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, that was my experience. And I haven't met the guys that you've met. I haven't met, Callahan and some of those guys, but, same thing. I mean, I always try to judge everybody based off of just my personal interaction with somebody. And you can say somebody's the greatest person ever, and if they're an asshole or douchebag, then, good for you. But I thought he was a weirdo.
Yeah.
But Steve was definitely just a great guy, and he's in the public eye. And it's interesting, even some people, with just how busy someone is, like, well, I texted so-and-so and they didn't get back to me. It's like, well, if that offends you, then don't text me, because sometimes I can be really bad about, you see a message and we're in the middle of a podcast and you see a message like, oh, I'm going to get back to John. And
then you
5 days later, like,
hey,
I go to text John and I'm like, oh shit, he texted me 5 days ago,
Right.
So yeah, it's tough, but, well, that's cool, man. Well, I appreciate you coming down. It's, I hope to kill some more stuff and bring it to you. That would be good. Yeah.
Did they get everything figured out for the export from Spain?
Yeah. My assistant's Max got that, I think, pretty much handled. So
she got a hold of.
Yeah, we're learning about. I told her right away. I was just like, call John Hayes, because this is literally his business. Just getting the heads from the animals that we had shot in Spain last year back into the U.S.
Right.
And it's kind of sucked because like Brandon and I stuff is at the same taxidermist over there. I just did European stuff with them, and I was thinking, well, they can ship it all together and save the shipping and whatever. And it's like, nope, it's all got to go in its own container, and you got to pay. Brandon's got to pay his fees, and I got to pay mine. I'm like, well, that sucks.
Right.
It's twice as much money. It's not cheap. I was kind of surprised. I was like, damn.
Oh yeah. Like I had a few guys that, they put in and win the little safari in Africa for, virtually nothing. And they get over there and, it's so cheap. I'll pick up a couple extra planes, game animals, and they about shit with all the fees and stuff for your dips and your packs and your permits and the shipping.
Yeah.
It adds up quick.
Somebody kind of warned me, and I'd never experienced, but somebody kind of warned me at one of these banquets one time too. I was like, damn, a hunt in Africa for like $2,500. And they were like, oh yeah, but you start tacking on 8 or 10 animals worth of fees and everything else, and it ends up being a lot more money. Especially, you get guys at those banquets that are living paycheck to paycheck, and then they're like, well, I can spend $2,500.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then next thing you know, it's $10,000. And it's a different story.
And you still don't have any mounts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's 100% true. Yeah. It's crazy. Well, I sure appreciate it.
Me too.
And that pedestal mount, if anyone's ever in our office, you walk upstairs, it's going to be the first thing you see. So I'm proud to have your work in here.
Well, thank you. I'm proud to have it in here too.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Did you bring any knives to sharpen? We probably should sharpen something for you.
I brought one, but.
Okay. All right. Well, we better send you home with some new fresh stuff.
Right.
Get those poor employees of yours sharp knife.
Back into work.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you.